Shalom. Today we look at Parashah Vayak'hel, and it means "and he assembled." Now this portion is about the physical construction of the tabernacle, and there's some interesting things we are going to look at, specifically within the sequence of the construction, as well as with the work that happened within the tabernacle. So just looking at briefly the sequence of events, the first instruction is about the Sabbath and the preparations of making the tabernacle. So as we know, the first step is to rest, and then they could start the construction of the tabernacle. And then at the end of this Torah portion, it's about the outer court of the tabernacle. If you connect those two, you get the starting point, which is the Sabbath, and the end point, which is the outer court, where all the people are assembled. And then sandwiched in between of that are all the other objects within the holy place, the Holy of Holies. And so that gives us a bit of an idea of the starting and finishing end, and what are the phases and the steps we need to go through in constructing this tabernacle. Now when we look at the word Vayak'hel, it means he assembled. Now it comes from the word kahal, that is made up of the word, the letters kuf, hey, lamet. Now that means to assemble or together, and that's also the base of the word kehila, which means tent of meeting or assembly or church. And what we note there is the kuf lamet that we found previously, which is the kul and kal, two words that mean light and sound, which are the two mediums that connect to Yahweh, which Yahweh interact with us. And that's also symbolism of Jacob's ladder. Now in this Torah portion, we see that the hay is inserted in the word kuf lamet, and that makes the word assembled together. And hay, of course, means breath of life. It also means light. It also represents revelation. And we see the same when we look at Abraham's name and Sarah's name with the inserted hays. Yahweh revealed to them their calling, and he changed their characters, and he also imparted his spirit within them. Now, connecting the assembly with the Sabbath is basically connecting space and time. The assembly is the space where people gather together, and the Sabbath is the time when you connect together. And the letter Hey basically connects these two principles, and that is the outcome of the connection between the timing of Yahweh, the Sabbath, and his Moedim, and the assembly of the people, or the people coming together, where he will reveal certain attributes of what that meeting is all about. Now the weekly Sabbath, we know it's about the sequence of the topics. Now we go through the year, and the Moedim, or the festivals, are about the work of Mashiach. Now one interesting thing is that the Sabbath is instructed for the fourth time in this parashah. Number 4 relates to the letter Dalet, also that's got the meaning door, and that is a symbol of Mashiach. Now Mashiach, we know, is the doorway that enter into his kingdom eventually, and now we see that the Sabbath is the doorway within time that allows you to enter into Yahweh's presence. What's also interesting is that the word Sabbath is used for the 13th time in this parashah, and that connects to the 13 attributes of Yahweh, and also the 13 attributes of grace, which we looked at last time. So what we see here is, like in the Hebrew concept, the thing that is mentioned the first time is the thing that's most important. So Yahweh start off with underlining the importance of the Sabbath, and that is connected to a warning, because if you do any work on this day, you shall be put to death. And we see the same warning in the Garden of Eden when Yahweh said, you can eat from all the trees, but if you eat from this tree, you will surely die. And since we connect this to the Sabbath, I want to bring it into context of timing. So the trees in the garden, there were two trees in the middle of the garden, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now they ate from the tree of knowledge, and then Yahweh removed them from the garden so they will not eat from the tree of life. So the sequence from Adam and Chava's perspective, or Adam and Eve's perspective, is to eat from the tree of knowledge and then eat from the tree of life. And I believe that Yahweh wanted them to eat from the tree of knowledge, but they had to eat from the tree of life first. Just like you do the Sabbath first, and then you construct, you eat from the tree of life first, then you learn all about the knowledge of what Yahweh is about, what is good and what is evil within His creation. So the sequence or the timing is underlined in the concept of the garden. It's also underlined in the concept of this Torah portion, and it's also important for meeting together, coming together as an assembly. The 13 construction steps of the tabernacle. Now, last year I looked at this as well, and it's different between the instructions of constructing the tabernacle which Moses received on the mountain, and then the physical construction of the tabernacle. So that within this table you can see the differences. Now, last year I went into the detail of looking at the differences and the numbers and all that. I'm not going to go into that this year, but what I want to highlight here is, because we're looking at 13 steps, it's an unequal number. That means there's a center, and then there's an equal number of branches if you construct it on a 13 branch menorah. And for those who don't know, a menorah is normally 7 branches, but the menorah pattern can be anything from 3 branches, which is center, and then 2 on one on each side. And in this case, we can have 13 with an equal number on each side, which is 6 and 6. Now, what this highlights is the center branch, which is the most important one, which is in the middle. And then the starting points will normally be from the outside in. We work ourselves to the center. And the starting point, what we see in this parashah, is the Sabbath and the outer court. And we know that the outer court is where the people assembled, where the majority of the people could have access to. The inner court, or the holy place, the Holy of Holies, was for the priesthood and high priest only. So we can see the approaching towards the center is the menorah. And also one interesting thing is that the tabernacle consists of 3 components: the outer court, the holy place, the Holy of Holies. And because it's 3, you can put them on a menorah pattern as well. And then the center one is the holy place. We would have thought it's the Holy of Holies, but the Holy of Holies is one of the outcomes. But the holy place is the center where everything happens, and that coincides with the menorah that's also situated in the center location of the tabernacle. Now, number 13 is the 13 attributes of Yahweh, and in this case it's the 13 steps of the construction of the tabernacle. Just to recap, number 13 relates to 3 words: oneness, or echad, which is aleph chet dalet; my father, which is abi, which is aleph bet yod; and then love, which is ahava, which is aleph hey bet hey. And with those 3 words, we see that they each start with a letter aleph, which we looked at last week. The 3 attributes of Yahweh and His conversion or interaction with the aleph that transform you, and the 3 steps that's associated with that. We see the same symbolism applicable to the construction of the tabernacle and what the outcome of the tabernacle is. It is to experience oneness that's within the outer court and the assembly and the priesthood and the high priest, all of that to be echad with them all. And then to meet the Father is the ultimate outcome, and coming together we experience His love in amongst one another, and also from our Father and back unto Him as well. That's the purpose of the worship, is to love and adore and to have a relationship with one another. Now, as I mentioned, the center branch is the menorah, and the menorah is the symbol of our faith. We always thought, no, it's the cross. The cross is the symbol of our faith if you believe in Mashiach. Now, the cross is the object on which the Mashiach died, and it was an ancient Paleo-Hebrew letter Tav. That means cross, it also means death, and it also means yoke. So in the death of Mashiach, there's also the picking up of the yoke. As I mentioned previously with the cycle, the beginning and the end connects. Death reconnect back into the next cycle of life. So your death to yourself, when you come to faith, connects to carrying up and picking up the yoke, which take you to the next level or the next cycle in becoming a priest. Last week we looked at the training of the priesthood. It's all about picking up the stake, picking up the cross and carrying it. And prior to that, you have to come to faith and you have to die to the old man, so to speak. So we see the death and life symbolism in the letter Tav. But the real symbol of our faith is the menorah, and I'll show you why. The menorah is translated as candlestick or lampstand, as also found in the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and 3, with the 7 churches, and it connects with the 7 branches as well, so it fits perfectly. The word menorah comes from the word ner, that means light, and it's formed from the word nur, that means fire. Now, fire is the consequence or the ultimate goal of the menorah. The menorah is not it. If you have a menorah in your assembly and there's no oil and no fire, it doesn't mean anything. Because Yahweh said, I will remove your lampstand from you. Because there's no oil in it and there's no light shining. So that means His presence is not there. And the connection to the presence we looked at previously is in Isaiah 11 verse 2, which talk about the 7 attributes of the Spirit of Yahweh, which also can be constructed on the 7 branch menorah. And if you go from the outside to the inside, knowledge, fear, strength and counsel, and then wisdom and understanding, in the middle branch is Yahweh. And that's how the Spirit train you up into meeting Yahweh and coming closer and closer to Him. So that's the symbol or the outcome of the menorah, is to interact with the menorah by you providing the oil and Yahweh providing the fire, and together you see the hay or the revelation, as we saw in the word kahal, that means to assemble. And now we assemble around the light that radiates from the center object, which is the menorah. What's interesting is the word fire is the word ash, aleph shin, that means flame, fire, and foundation. And that's also the foundation of our faith. But this foundation of faith is situated on top of the menorah. The menorah upholds it and lifts it up high. And we also know that the fire is the attribute of Yahweh. He's consuming fire, which is a symbol of His holiness. So all of these things connect together. Now what we see in this Torah portion, we're looking at the 2 outer branches. The Sabbath connects to the outer court, and they connect around or situated around the fire of the menorah, which is the center point of the tabernacle, as well as the center point of the construction of the tabernacle. And the outer court is where you get the congregation, where people assemble together, the word kahal, and that's the word connected to kehillah, which is a congregation or a church, if you like. And all of this come together on a specific time, which is the Sabbath. And as we know, most of the festivals have Sabbaths in them, except Passover. Passover is the day of preparation for unleavened bread, which is this festival, which is the first of the 3, for example. But the Sabbath is found within the Moedim, and therefore the Sabbath also represents the Moedim. Now, what's interesting about this Torah portion is we are in the context of Moses coming down and Yahweh giving him a new set of tablets, and then they start the construction. So I just want to take a step back and look at what we missed last week, because this is a fundamental truth that we need to understand, specifically for new believers coming in, and that's the concept of the renewed tablets and its connection to the renewed covenant, because it's the same pattern. Now, when we read about the sequence, Moses went up, Yahweh told him they're making a golden calf, then he came down, he saw that, he broke the tablets, the people were judged, then Yahweh asked him to go back up and to prepare 2 new blank tablets on which he will write the 10 commandments again. And those are basically similar to the renewed covenant concept. And what's interesting is that the second set of tablets were an exact copy of the first set. And the second set did not replace the first set, and it did not only have 1 commandment on it, it had all 10 of them on it. So what we see is the other idea of when something is written in stone in Hebrew culture, it means it cannot change. So that means the word of a king, he cannot retract his words. He can only extend more grace through additional words, which is the story of Esther and the story of Purim, which is coming up next prior to Passover. And this first set of tablets is the foundation of the covenant, or the rock of this covenant, and the second set is representing exactly the same, because they broke the first set through their sin and unbelief. Exodus 34 verse 1 says, "And Yahweh said unto Moshe, Cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones, and I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. So be ready in the morning, and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai, and present yourself to me on top of the mountain." And later in verse 10 to 11 he says, "Behold, I make a covenant before all the people. I will make such as have not been done on all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among you shall see the work of Yahweh, for it's an awesome thing that I will do with you. Observe what I commanded you this day." So we see that Yahweh says, I will make a covenant, and this covenant is connected to the second set of tablets. And he said it's a new thing, it's something he's doing that none of the people have ever seen. And it is something awesome that he will do with his people. And this basically is prophetic of the renewed covenant after the first coming of Mashiach, to extend that to all nations, which is an awesome thing. And this is basically the premise or the foundation of that prophetic word. Now, in relation to this, Yahweh also added 9 more commandments. But it's basically not adding them, it's repeating some of the commandments already there. So he re-emphasized this renewed covenant with the additional 9 commandments that he's now repeating. And the number 9, just for those who are looking at the Gematria, it means to move softly, to love, to go in, to enter in, be exalted in triumph, shouts of joy, and brother. So all of this is the motive, are the motive of Yahweh, allowing people to enter in and be exalted, and they will experience joy, and they will be brothers and sisters with one another. That's the idea of the congregation, but this congregation is drawing from all the nations, and that's our point in time where we are currently in. So looking at the 9 commandments, now just for context, this is in context of the renewed covenant, or this is in context of what Paul is preaching to the nations. The foundation is the 10 commandments, and then these additional 9 are the most important of the other commandments that Yahweh wants to highlight. So firstly, it starts with the second commandment, not to make images and bow down before them. And then Yahweh repeats the commandment of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and to keep it on its appointed time in the month of Aviv. So the timing is important here, because that's setting the first month of the first festival in the first month, on which the other festivals are calculated or counted from. If you have the first month, you'll know when the 7th is, if you count 7 moons, and also first fruits is counted from within that 7-day period. The next commandment after that is regarding first fruits, not to come empty-handed, and if you have a donkey, to redeem the donkey with a lamb if you don't have one. I'm not going to go into detail there, there's a bit of wisdom there as well. Then Yahweh repeats the commandment regarding the Sabbath, and to rest on the 7th day and to work 6 days. Then Yahweh repeats the commandment of the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot, celebrating this very event that they're currently living out, is the receiving of the Torah, the covenant, and the commandments. Then Yahweh repeats the commandment of the Feast of Ingathering, or the Feast of Sukkot, which is also known as the Feast of Tabernacles, which connects to the meaning of the name of this parashah, which is all about the assembly, to bring people together in tents to celebrate together. So that's the end goal, is to come together as brothers and sisters. Then Yahweh gave instruction regarding the Passover, the sacrifice of the unleavened bread, and the sacrifice, and then the instruction about unleavened bread, and not to mix with blood, so it needs to be roasted and then consumed. Then Yahweh repeats the commandment about first fruits, and not to prepare a goat in its mother's milk, which is a thing they did in the pagan cultures, and for them not to adopt that. So what we see here is a summary of the things that are important to Yahweh. Now what to note here is there are 7 commandments about the festivals, and there are 7 festivals. And then there are 2 commandments that are on the 2 tablets. First one is not to make images, and the other one is the Sabbath. And those are the most important ones on the tablets. Now when we look at the 9 commandments, 4 of the 7 are about the spring festivals, and 3 of the 7 are about the fall festivals, which is the first coming and second coming of Messiah. And this highlights the prophetic picture of the work of Messiah through the Moedim, as well as the themes of the spring festivals and the fall festivals, the first coming and the second coming of Mashiach, that will bring people back into unity in love of the Father and assembling together. The commandment about the 3 pilgrim festivals, if you look at them, you get Passover, Shavuot, and Tabernacles. You get the barley harvest, the wheat harvest, and the fruit harvest. If you put them on a menorah, you'll see that the Shavuot pilgrim festival is in the middle, which is the most important one, which is all about receiving the Torah and the harvest coming in. And we've looked at that last year with the wheat belly. It's a pregnant belly of the woman that's going to give birth. And that also coincides with the fall festivals and the coming of Mashiach, collecting his bride, and then all the nations who will be born into the kingdom. And it's all to do with the middle branch there. The 2 most important commandments on the 10 commandments, if you want to highlight 2, are the ones that are repeated, because Yahweh repeated the 10 commandments 3 times. First the 10 words, then the first set of commandments, then the second set of commandments, and now he is repeating 2 of those commandments for a 4th time. So that means that these 2 are the most important ones: not to make images and bow down before them, and keeping the Sabbath, and not working on the 7th day, but only work during 6 days. Now these two are the most important, because Yahweh knew after the first coming of Mashiach, these are the two ones they will break. So we know that the images one is broken by the Catholic Church. They brought images back into the religion. And also within Christianity, not bashing anyone, they make Yeshua an image. Just like the gods that Abraham's father served, they had a god for agriculture, a god for fertility, a god for this, a god for that. And whenever they've got a need, they grab the little image and then they worship the image. And as soon as they get what they want, they put the little image back. Now we treat Yeshua like a genie in a bottle. In the same way, whenever we've got a need, we grab him from the windowsill, we worship him, and as soon as we get what we want, we just put him back and go on with our own lives. So we worship Yeshua as if we are worshiping images. And that's also the pattern or the image of the golden calf worship. They worshiped, and they said they're worshiping Yahweh, but it was this image of this golden calf. So we can't transform the image of Yeshua into an image of a golden calf or into an image of an idol and worship him in that way. You need the living relationship. It's not just there to get you out of trouble and to give you a little miracle if you need one. The second thing Yahweh knew that they will break is the Sabbath. Now, the Catholic Church, yet again, changed the Sabbath to Sunday worship. And on top of that, they changed the calendar. So now even our Jewish brothers are out of sync with the biblical calendar. And that's what we discussed earlier on in this Torah cycle. So those are the two main things. And Yahweh wants us to try and get back to it, not to break those. And on top of that, underlining the Moedim, how important they are. And while you look at the Moedim and looking at how we worship Yahweh, when we worship Yahweh, you stand on the foundation of the rock of the 10 Commandments. The first 5 is about worshiping Yahweh. The second 5 is about loving your neighbor. So all of that comes into play in the new covenant faith, if you like, where the renewed covenant is now at play. So very important to understand, because as a result of the influence of man-made traditions and all of that, which is also a form of an image, we worship ourselves. We don't worship Yahweh and his words. We created a Babylonian system. Babylon means mixing and confusion. And that's what this mushmash mixed religion that exists within Christianity as well as Judaism. They've got different sects or different denominations or different ways to worship him, and they all split off from one another because they don't agree with one another, and they even fight with one another because of the mixing and because of the confusion. Now, in order to get rid of the confusion, you have to go back to the foundation of the rock, the 10 Commandments, and then look at these 9 commandments and then cleanse yourself and filter out all the confusion and just stick to these things as the highest priority. Not saying these replace any of the other, it just means these ones are more important. Now, what further supports the renewed covenant is what we read in Jeremiah 31, verse 31 to 34, that says, "Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant I made with their fathers at the day I took them by the hand and bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares Yahweh. But this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares Yahweh. I will put my Torah within them on their heart, and I will write it, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people." Now, reading this verse, just something to note here, is making this new covenant or renewed covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. So we need to know what Yahweh means by the house of Israel and what he means by the house of Judah. Now, if you read the rest of Jeremiah, you'll see it interchanges the house of Israel with the house of Ephraim. And the reason is because Ephraim was the tribe that was the largest tribe at that time of the 10 tribes, which is named the house of Israel. And the reason there were two houses, it was after King Solomon and his son Rehoboam and Jeroboam, they split off. And Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, I think it's the son of Solomon, he stayed in Jerusalem. And Jeroboam went north and he started idol worship with the 10 tribes, and they split off. And then the 10 tribes got lost into the nations because of the curse that came upon them for worshipping idols, because they did not adhere to these 2 commandments that Yahweh showed them. And that resulted in the house of Israel, 10 tribes, and the house of Judah, which is basically 3 tribes, which is Benjamin, Levi, and Judah. Now, Judah is just the main name for it, because Yehudah or Judah is where the name Jews come from. So when you talk about Jews, you actually talk about the house of Judah that consists of 3 tribes. Why 3 tribes? House of Judah, the bloodline of Judah, the Mashiach came from. The tribe of Levi were the priesthood that existed in the time of Mashiach, first coming. And the house of Benjamin, he had the land on which the temple was built. So we had to have those 3 things, or 3 tribes together to represent the house of Judah in the time of the first coming of Mashiach, for that to happen. And the other tribes were scattered into the nations. Now Yahweh said, I'll make a new covenant with these 2 houses. That means that this covenant will not contradict what the Jews believe. What did the Jews believe? They believe that the Torah still stands. Even though they've got the Talmud they added to it, the Torah is still number 1. So when we look at the house of Israel, which is Ephraim, Ephraim means double fruitfulness of double fish, the sign of the fish, which is a symbol of Christians. So the nations come back in when Yahweh cast out his nets and fish back the 10 tribes. And with them a mixed multitude will come in, which are the nations. And the Christians are a result of the house of Judah, who's now being restored. And with them the nations come in. So that's a very fundamental thing to understand. Now, looking at from a Christian perspective, the Torah is abolished. No, Jeremiah says, this covenant is made for both houses, and both houses will accept it. And this covenant is based on the Torah that is placed in your heart. And we know that the Jews believe with their hearts that the Torah is the word of Yahweh. But we also know that the Spirit of Yahweh writes the Torah on your heart. That's more the anointing of His Spirit. Those who believe in Mashiach, who are coming through Mashiach, they received His Spirit, and then His Spirit represent the Torah. So we got the written word, and we got the Spirit of the written word, which is the same thing, which is the Torah. And that is the new covenant. It's the same as the previous tablets. The new set of tablets has got exactly the same thing written on it. So the new covenant is based on the Torah, which is the written down book of the instructions of Yahweh, which is called the first 5 books of the Bible, which is the Torah. So just like you have the first original, the Torah, the renewed Torah is the same Torah but written on the heart. Just like you get the 2 sets of tablets. The original tablets that was broken, and then the renewed tablets that is now written on your stony heart. So that's a very, very fundamental thing that you need to understand. What's also to note here is that Yahweh called the covenant the Torah. He connects the 2 with one another. So if you say the Torah is abolished, you actually say the covenant is abolished. And Yahweh said, I will do an awesome thing with you. I will give you this covenant. Now this covenant, we don't have the tablets of stone, but we do have the written Torah with those 10 words written down as well as the things associated with that or hanging from that, which are the other commandments and instructions, which contain the wisdom of Yahweh to help and direct us so that we can become part of His kingdom. So the new covenant is stronger than the old covenant. Why do I say that? Because the new one worked from the inside out. The old one worked from the outside in. If you compare the Jews, what they do, they study the Torah, they read the Torah, but they only understand the Torah based on what the rabbis teach them. And the rabbis teach them based on what the previous rabbis taught them, and what the previous rabbis taught are recorded in the Talmud. And that is sometimes hit and miss. Sometimes it's the opinion of man, sometimes it's a tradition, sometimes it's the truth revealed by Yahweh. So it's a bit of a Babylonian system, and quite frankly, the Babylonian Talmud is one of the set of books that they adhere to. I just show you the mixing of confusion within the Talmud as well. So Yahweh has given us gifts of the Spirit. He also reveals His Torah within us that change your inner man or inner woman in line with the Torah, which is the character of Yahweh. His word is written down. That's the one word, kul and kal, remember, sound and light. The word that was spoken is now written, and the written word can be read in the presence of light. So the medium of light, through our eyes, we can absorb the Torah as well. And that is how we interact with the Torah, how we receive the words of wisdom from Yahweh. Now, why is the new one stronger? Because His Spirit, the letter Hey, is now imparted in the congregation. Now make that Torah alive within you. Now you want to learn the Torah, and if you want to, He also reveals the Torah to you. So you don't need the rabbi and Rabbi Achi and Rabbi this and that and the Talmudian recording of all the wisdom of all the rabbis. You can just ask Yahweh. And also through the gifts of the Spirit, He gave the gift of teaching. And those people have the ability to reveal the Torah to His people today, within our culture, within our language. So that's an interesting fundamental thing that you need to understand regarding the renewed covenant.